So we have an element of denial.
Oh, yes.
And self-deception.
Particularly associated with the left hemisphere, extremely unreliable.
There was one particular incident that you write about in your book, and I think it was Ramachandran talking about he had a patient who was paralysed on the left side of her body, but her right hemisphere was damaged, so that would tally up. But she denied the paralysis.
Yes. But
then he injected her with salt water, like a placebo or a nocebo, and then he said, now I've anaesthetised this side, and then she could accept it. She said, oh yes,
that's right.
Anaesthetised.
She was able to take the responsibility.
So if there was any way out for her, then she could.
Yes.
That was fine.
It's very revealing because it shows that at some level the left hemisphere knows that all is not right. But the great thing is it doesn't want to be responsible for anything that is not good, proper and right. And it will deny, therefore, involvement in anything that might make it appear that it had a weakness. And this denial of a paralysis, that particular incident is related by Ramachandran, but it's very common. I mean, almost anybody in general medical practice would have seen this phenomenon. I remember seeing a patient on a ward round who came in the night, had a right hemisphere stroke, was paralysed on the left, and when I came to say, how are you this morning, he said, absolutely fine. I said, well, any weakness, for example, on your left side, perhaps your left arm? Absolutely fine. Well, could you move it then? And then the person says, there, I did it. Nothing actually moves. And if you pick up the paralysed arm, bring it right round in front of the person and say, now move that, they say, oh, that's not my arm, that belongs to the person in the next bed. So the degree of denial is quite astonishing.
And would you link that to, again, a kind of spectrum of experience, so that we can all do that a little bit, even when we're not damaged on either of the hemispheres? For example, I'm thinking of Leo Festinger's research on cognitive dissonance, the original, where he infiltrated a flying saucer cult in Chicago, I think it was. And this cult believed that there was going to be a huge universal flood imminently, and that the members of the cult, would be spared this flood because flying saucers would come down and take them away just in the nick of time. And Leon Festinger wanted to see how they'd react when this didn't happen, because he assumed it wouldn't, because he was an optimist. and so he infiltrated the cult, pretending to be a cultist, and he found that at first they didn't really quite know how to react, but then they asserted their belief in this doomsday cult even more strongly, and they suddenly wanted publicity, whereas before they shunned it, to tell the world that it was their faith that had stopped the flood from happening. And that to me seems almost a similar kind of an account to the damaged hemispheric patient in a way that rather than changing course flexibly and updating their beliefs, they were more keen to carry on fervently believing what they believed.
That's right. And you don't, as you rightly say, need to have specifically right hemisphere damage. But ways of thinking that encourage you to think serially, analytically, do engage the left hemisphere. And two things about that. One is that when people are thinking like that, if you show them evidence that they're wrong, it tends not to weaken their belief, but to strengthen their belief in their false position. But another very nice piece of research was done by Dunning and Kruger. Dunning and Kruger noticed that in an educational setting, often the students who were performing most poorly thought they were performing extremely well, even when they could see that other people were doing better and getting higher marks. And when this was pointed out to them, they didn't change their mind at all. In some subsequent research, they showed that it was when people were clear that they had a rational, analytical approach to the situation that they became more and more adherent to it and more convinced that everything they were doing was right when it was evident that it was going wrong. And people who were more flexible and could adopt different strategies for apparently similar situations, realizing that they were in fact different. In other words, a much more ad hoc approach, which sounds much more like the way the right hemisphere would approach things, i.e. what's actually going on, not what in theory is going on. They were able to change their position, and they were much better at judging how good they were or not.
Update their
Update
their perception.
That's right, yes.